This time, too, it's the history of relations between Japan and Korea. What kind of relationship do your country and its neighboring country have? Are they on good terms? Usually, I think the reality is that neighboring countries maintain an important relationship but are not on good terms. Japan and Korea have a similar relationship. In the previous article, I discussed Hideyoshi's invasion of Korea. In this article, I will discuss the relationship between Japan and Korea from the Edo period onwards. The two large-scale Japanese expeditions were forced to retreat in 1598 after the death of Hideyoshi, without achieving their original goal of overthrowing the Ming dynasty. The main force of this expedition was made up of daimyos directly under Hideyoshi's command and daimyos based in western Japan, and the financial burden on them was extremely heavy. Ieyasu Tokugawa, who was the second most powerful man after Hideyoshi, did not join this expeditionary force, and was able to preserve his military strength. After Hideyoshi's death, Ieyasu was able to take over the country, and this was largely due to the fact that he was able to preserve his strength during this war. The Ming dynasty also suffered disproportionate war costs and casualties in this war, and it was a major factor in their defeat in the war against the Jurchen people who rose to power in the 17th century. The most tragic victims were the people of Joseon, who became a battleground. The people of Joseon suffered the pillage of their food supplies by the three armies of Japan, Joseon, and Ming. As Joseon was responsible for supplying food for the Ming army, the Joseon dynasty imposed harsh food taxes on the people. As a result, even areas that were not directly involved in the war were deprived of food by the Joseon dynasty, and the country was devastated and the population drastically reduced. Although the Korean people regarded the Japanese army as their greatest enemy, they also greatly hated the Ming army, which committed acts of looting within Korea, as their second greatest enemy. An unexpected side effect of this war was that it greatly changed Korean culture. One example of this is the introduction of chili peppers from Japan. The introduction of this chili pepper became an element in the creation of kimchi, a national dish of Korea, and formed the foundation for the creation of modern Korean cuisine. Ieyasu Tokugawa, who came to power, adopted a policy of maintaining friendly relations with foreign countries in order to stabilize his regime. During the Muromachi period, the daimyos of western Japan amassed great power through trade with China and Korea. Ieyasu needed to ensure that the daimyos of western Japan did not gain the same kind of power, and so it was necessary for the shogunate to have exclusive control over foreign trade. In addition, the expeditionary force from Ming had returned to Joseon, and they needed to protect their own country again. The court and the people both held the same hostility towards Japan, but they wanted to avoid a situation where Japan would invade again by cutting off diplomacy. For this reason, Joseon also wanted to restore diplomacy with Japan. The diplomatic missions from Joseon were called Joseon missions to Japan. They came from Joseon to congratulate the new shogun on his accession to the shogunate in Edo. The objectives of the Korean side were to establish diplomatic relations with Japan and to receive an apology from the Japanese side for the war and the liberation of prisoners of war taken during the war. The first delegation was in 1607, and they were received by the second shogun, Hidetada Tokugawa. However, it is said that no formal letter of apology was sent from the Japanese side. Throughout the Edo period, the Joseon missions came to Japan 12 times. Let's briefly explain the Joseon dynasty during the Edo period. The ruling class of Joseon further strengthened their sense of belonging to China, which had protected Joseon from Japanese invasion, along with their traditional Chinese ideology. Korea is a neighboring country of China, and its cultural influence was even more intense than in Japan. A class system also existed in Korea, with a class of nobles called Yangban, a class of commoners, and a class of slaves. In Joseon, which was strongly influenced by Confucian thought from China, labor was considered to be lowly, and the Yangban did not work at all, living off the wealth they had taken from the common people in an absurd manner. They had various privileges, such as exemption from military service, tax exemption, and reduced or remitted sentences. They were ridiculed as not being able to get up on their own even if they fall, or not being able to hold anything heavier than chopsticks. And because the common people would lose all their possessions to the Yang band if they had any, they never saved anything extra. There was no solidarity among the peasants that could stand up to the ruling class, as we saw in the Japanese village, and they were simply robbed. For this reason, both agriculture and industry were underdeveloped in Korea, and it had not even developed a monetary economy. Isabella Bird, a British traveler who stayed in Korea at the end of the Edo period, said this about the royal capital of Seoul. The streets are full of human and cattle excrement, and the residents of the streets don't even pay any attention to it. Seoul is the dirtiest city in the world. During the Edo period, Edo developed into one of the world's leading cities with a population of 1 million. For the first time in world history, the culture of Edo, which had arisen from the people, flourished, rather than the culture led by wealthy nobles and royalty. Then, in the 19th century, Western countries approached East Asia and tried to promote colonial policies. Poor samurai all over Japan were worried about such a world, and they overthrew the Edo shogunate, causing the Meiji Restoration and the birth of the Meiji government. Like Japan, Korea was caught up in the same turbulent global situation, but there were very few people there who had the knowledge and passion to worry about their own country. The Meiji government, which had opened up the country and was promoting westernization, had many people who thought that they should also encourage Korea to open up and work together to face the West. However, the Joseon dynasty was China first, and looked down on Japan, which was advancing westernization, as being lowly. The sad history of Korea and Japan began with the Meiji Restoration. In this article, we have looked at the relationship between Japan and Korea during the Edo period. Although the Joseon dynasty was a country with which Japan had official diplomatic relations, the relationship between the two countries was rather weak. This was partly due to the fact that both countries had adopted a policy of national isolation. This thin relationship was enough for each of them to not know about each other and to have their own egocentric ideas. Next time, I will explain the relationship between Japan and Korea after the Meiji Restoration. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel and press the like button.